Thank you for staying with us. As promised, our guest is in studio, Onesmus Matio, the organizing secretary for UASU, and we'll be discussing all matters to do with university funding. Thank you so much for coming. Now, the CS has since retracted his statement saying the government will continue funding universities. But even before, prior to his statements, there was still the issue of inadequate funding for universities. Mr. Maliku, how dire is the situation, if you can paint the picture for us?
Well, thank you. I think the reality on the ground is that the public universities have been underfunded, and almost all public universities are currently in a deep financial crisis. And unless the government does something to save the situation in public universities, the situation is so bad that probably we might be forced to close some universities in the future, because most of the universities cannot beat their budgets. They are sinking into debt day by day, and it's not a very good situation in public universities.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Now, if you could paint the best scenario that the government was adequately funding universities, will this mean that students joining the university will find modern infrastructure perhaps? Or maybe if you could explain to us, does the underfunding affect the quality of education in public universities?
Yes, very true. Of course, the underfunding affects the quality of the education in the university in many ways. First, the funding model that the government is using to fund the public universities, which is a DUC, the differentiated unit cost, the government has been funding about 40% of the DUC. The proposal has been that they could increase that to around 80%. Now, if they did that, then that would perhaps solve the situations in the public universities. You realize that in many cases, the capitation from the government that comes to the universities is not even enough to pay the salaries. So, for example, you might find there are certain universities, their wage bill or the budget for their salaries about, say, 100 million. And what they get from the government is about 70 million. So when they get the 70 million, they can only pay the net pay of the workers. And remember, they have the suppliers to pay. They have the statutory deductions like the KRA to pay. They have the third-party deductions like the pension deductions, the bank loans that have to be paid. So that means that they only pay the net salary, and therefore these other deductions, obligations cannot be paid. Now it means therefore that the university is sinking into debt day by day. Now coming to the quality of education, the reality is that of course it also affects the motivation of the lecturers and the facilities in many ways. As we speak right now, there is a university that is paying 57% of the net salary. Now, they are not able to pay their lecturers the full salary, and for the last few years, they have been paying 50%. I want to assure you, I don't think there's any work in this country that is paying 57% of their salary, but that is the situation in the university. Now, you realize that because of the underfunding, most universities have unemployed lecturers, and therefore that what that means is that the other part of teaching is taken up by people that we call the part-time lecturers. Those are the lecturers that will come to teach on contract basis at go. Now, many universities do not pay the part-time workers. I know of the universities that have not paid since 2018 and 2019. So you are teaching a class now, you're working now in 2022, but you'll probably be paid in 2026 or 2027. Now that will really tell you the kind of quality that these people are going to offer to these students, because one, they're demotivated, and secondly, you are not likely to get those serious quality professionals coming through that kind of a job. And therefore, because of the inability to pay for the part-time, that also has affected the quality. Some cases you find there are some part-time lecturers who cannot even make it to class because they perhaps don't have anything. In fact, it is the lecturers that have been funding the public universities when it comes to teaching, because lecturers will pay from their own other sources to come and teach, and they are not being paid. So the underfunding in that way has highly affected the quality. Also in terms of infrastructure, and other resources that are required, you realize that the university cannot, fund them well.
Mr. Maluki, the CS mentioned that public universities here still maintained that they should look into innovative ways or other revenue streams in order to be able to get sufficient funding. What is your take on that?
Well, I think that statement for us, I think, is regrettable. When he talks about universities coming up with innovative ideas to generate funds, how about other public parastatals? Are they also, and other government agencies, are they also going to generate their own funds? The key business of the university is teaching and research. And therefore, I don't understand what he means by us generating funds, because we are a public university, we are not a private entity, and our focus should not be in generating money, but into imparting knowledge into the students, and that is what we are paid to do. Well, I think he might be comparing the universities now with the universities a few years ago. Now, you realize that a few years ago, many public universities had several students under Module 2, or what we call the parallel students, because the many students who got the minimum requirement, which is C+, to go to the university, could not be admitted under the government program. So that means that they could come to the public universities through self-sponsored and pay fees that is higher than the government. And because many public universities used to admit many students under the self-sponsored program, then they used to earn, or they used to generate a lot of money. And perhaps by then they were able to meet their financial obligation. But you remember that a few years down, I think it was during Matiang's time, that they changed the structures and the policies, and now almost all the students that get the minimum requirement, that is C+, they are admitted to the university through a government through the government programs, and therefore there are no students who will come to the public university to pay their own money under the self-sponsored, which the universities use to generate money. Now, in the absence of the self-sponsored students, and also the private universities are also coming now to private universities, are also competing with the few students that are there, we have also seen a case where the government is also taking the government sponsored students to the private university. That is also now means that the money that could have gone to the public universities are now going to private entities. We don't understand what logic was that, and therefore we feel that we feel that for him to say that the university should come up with innovative ways to generate money, I want to assure you there's only one way that the university right now can generate that kind of money, is for the private universities to charge the same fees as the private universities. And if that is going to happen, then so many Kenyans are not going to afford university education. It is only going to be left for the rich. If you compare the fees that is paid in private universities and the fees that is paid in the public universities, there's a huge difference. Very few Kenyans can afford to educate their students, their children in private universities.
Now, COVID-19 taught us that we don't have to be physically in class to be taught. Are we looking at a situation where public universities can embrace online learning so as to cut costs?
Online learning has been there, and especially after the COVID-19, most of the universities began going on online. Most of the universities, when right now they are doing blended, whereby you meet for sometimes and a few classes, and then you also meet them online. Well, that can also cut cost, but still it does not, the difference may not be so much, but yes, that can also be used in a way to cut cost, in that as if I'm just teaching from my sitting room, then I'm able to meet many students. I can combine classes and teach them, and that can also in a way cut cost. Yes, it can, but I don't think it will be so significant as to bridge the gap, that if the government stopped funding the public universities, that cannot be an option to bridge the gap. Yes.
Now, we've had incidences of cases of looting in universities. Just a few years ago, a local station ran with a story that Masai Mara University, there was a case where 177 million shillings was looted by the Vice Chancellor. Of course, the case is still ongoing in court. She is innocent until proven guilty. But what do you think the government can do? What measures can it do? Structures put in place to ensure that this little funding that is coming to universities is adequately and efficiently used?
Well, of course, there has been a few cases where there's been mismanagement in the public universities. Some vice chancellors are not very straightforward, and because maybe they end up employing their own relatives around them, then they end up mismanaging the funds. And I want to say that in a way that has also led to the financial problems that we have. But again, coming to your question, yes, it is true, it is right that the government is able to come up with the structures and to be able to monitor and to audit public universities to ensure that the funds that comes to the universities are used properly. But again, that should not be used to deny public universities money just because one or two vice chancellors have mismanaged funds. Those could be one or two cases, but I believe most of the vice chancellors are good, they are honest, they are good managers with finances, and therefore I think that could not be used as a reason not to fund public university, because the government should have good mechanisms to ensure that those rogue vice chancellors who mismanage public funds are taken into account. They should account for that, and they also need to ensure that we have good managers in our public universities, so that as the government comes in to fund the university, then those mismanagement are not there. As a union, we have also been fighting these cases where we feel that some vice chancellors are contributing to financial mismanagement, and we've always voiced our concerns that universities' resources, which are public resources, need to be managed properly with good accountability. Mm-hmm. Yes.
The CBC Review Task Force is going around counties taking views from the members of the public. I understand they're also supposed to take views regarding university funding. As a union, what are the sentiments you have shared so far with the task force?
Well, we are. That's a process that we're going about the CBC. You see, I think one of the key challenges is that the CBC was done in a hurry. They did not take time to develop the curriculum. They did not take time to do the piloting so that they could see the viability of the CBC. And I think generally that is the challenge that we're having. Now, you realize that in a few years, these students will come to the university. As lecturers, we don't know what we're going to teach. And it is the same challenge that is being faced by the teachers, who themselves do not know what they are going to teach these students, because the competence-based curriculum focuses more on the students developing, the competence by himself. So the teacher is just there to guide the students. But sometimes, because the teachers themselves were not trained on how to guide the students, then they also face this challenge. So we are also, wondering, when they come to university, so what are we going to teach? We need time to think around with the team. We'll present our views to them, and we want to see, as these students prepare to come to the university, what are we going to teach them? Because we feel the reality is that they need to be taught different curriculum than this one they are teaching. Another challenge that we are also having is that meant to understand that there's no ranking of the students. This one has gotten an A, this one has gotten an E. So how are we going to determine who goes to study medicine and who goes to study the social sciences? Who goes to do this course and who goes to do the other course? I think that's a challenge that we are waiting to see how that will be done, because different courses will require different grades in different fields of academic, so that our students can excel. So here we have students who are not being ranked, they are not being evaluated. We're still wondering, how are we going to differentiate who studies what and who studies what field? Yes.
Just to take you back, we've mentioned that underfunding is the biggest challenge for public universities, but there are also other challenges that students face while universities, the issue of missing marks, the issues of learners finishing the entire four-year course and not graduating because of one mistake or another. What can you say on universities embracing digital technology in order to ensure that these little mishaps that learners face during their stay in schools are managed?
I think part of that is also due to the underfunding. Sorry, because some universities I know, they have got missing marks because the part-time lecturers will choose to withhold the marks. And they say, unless I'm paid what I've taught for the last 4 years, I'm not going to release the marks. And the university cannot cook marks for these students. And therefore, the students will end up, being the one to suffer because the lecturer has disappeared with the marks. He says, I cannot produce the marks unless I'm paid. And the university cannot, come up with other marks to give the students. That will be an irregularity. And therefore, partially also, part of the missing marks have also been contributed by underfunding. But again, I think the issues of missing marks, there have been very few cases in very few universities, but I think these are a few challenges that can be handled administrative-wise. I think all universities now are, they have digital ways of keying in marks, so that once you mark, you key in marks very well, and the issue of missing marks, I think unless cases where a lecturer willingly withholds marks for those reasons, then I think those are the issues of missing marks have been well addressed in most of the universities.
For sure, I can tell you the issue of missing marks is a huge thing for university students, but we can discuss that on a different day. Yes. Now, there's a new administration, there's a new CS. What words of wisdom can you share with them as they begin their tenure to better and improve the education system in the country, even as we wind up?
Well, I think what we expect from this new government is that first they need to focus in education, especially their education, because if you're talking about economic growth, economic development, then you must put key efforts in the education sector. And therefore, we expect that the new CS is going to come up with ways on how to save the universities from collapsing financially. Let him bring all the stakeholders around the table, let us talk, and let us see how we can resolve this. The president promised when he was campaigning that he's going to ensure that the funding for universities is going to increase. In fact, he specifically said that the research fund is going to ensure that it is increased. And we hope that if the president is going to do what he promised to the higher education sector, I can assure you that they're really going to be a great change. We don't expect the CES to be giving statements like he did that are generating a lot of heat around. I've also seen students threatening to go on strike. I think that is not the way to go. It needs to come around the table and address. And I want the CS to know that the docket that he has come in has a lot of challenges. It will require a lot of consultation and a lot of soberness and around the table talk with the key stakeholders so that we can see how to address this. There have been two ways that has been proposed to save this. One is to increase the government capitation. Should the government find that they don't want to increase, the other way is to allow the universities to increase the fees, which will also going to generate, that is also going to generate a little fund for the universities. You realize that the school fees that is being paid in the university right now actually has been paid for over 20 years, 16,000 per academic year. I think that is the cheapest you can ever get. So if they allowed that, I know there's been a proposal that they allow that to be increased to around 48,000. If they do that, then those are the two ways. They either look at the increasing capitation or trying to increase something little from the fees.
Thank you so much. I know I've mentioned that was my final question, but maybe lastly, there's been the issue of mismatch between the courses that students learn in school and the job opportunities out here. If maybe you can voice your opinion regarding that. Do you think that public universities or universities in general are offering the skills that are required in the job market?
Well, maybe not, but I know what happens in a university. There is always a periodic review of the curriculum. And therefore, of course, the job market is, changing. Nowadays, you have technology almost in every sector. And therefore, I think what we need to do, or what the universities have been doing, is trying to change their program so that they can match, the jobs market. You have also seen, for example, in a certain university whereby they are trying to change some units. It was misinterpreted to mean that they are trying to do away with some courses. But that was not the case. I think the proposal was that they need to maybe to upgrade, or they need to change, or to renovate those courses. For example, a few years down the line, there was a compulsory unit that was taught in almost all the public universities, that is HIV/AIDS. Now, those many years back, HIV/AIDS was the real health challenge. But today we have other issues like COVID, we have other pandemics that are coming, so is still HIV/AIDS relevant? Perhaps not. So what we can do is to modify that HIV/AIDS unit that is being taught, and maybe put it in a way that is going to equip students with better skills to face pandemic when they are coming, issues like COVID and other pandemic when they come. How do you face them? So that is how we're trying to look at, trying to modify the units that we're teaching so that they can meet the current trend in the jobs market.
Thank you so much, Mr. Maluki Mutue. Thank you so much. That has been Onesmus Maluki Matio, who is the organizing secretary for UWASU, and he has been speaking to us on all matters to do with university